It's like, if you think about it, you understand that wood moves, but like you don't think about it until you've limited that wood movement.
And I would point out, you live in the wood movement capital of the country.
Yeah. It's just crawling along everywhere.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of air sealing, insulating, and vapor control. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. I'm joined today by Fine Homebuilding Editorial Director Andrew Zellner.
Coming to you live from my basement.
Green Building Advisor, Senior Editor Kiley Jacques.
Hello.
And producer Jeff Rose.
Hi.
You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. Well, it is great to see you all today. Thanks for being here.
Happy to be here.
Well, I figured that we would, just state right off the bat what we were going to be talking about today. So we do have some variation from our normal themes, but I think you'll find it comfortable ground, listeners. How y'all been? What have you been doing, Andrew? You look to be in new digs, I might observe.
Yeah, we've got a guest staying with us for about 6 weeks. I've got a friend who sold her house and is buying a new house, but close date is 6 weeks from her other close date. So she and her 2 cats are staying with us in the room that was formerly my office, and so now I'm down in the basement, which is also nice during summer because it stays cool down here.
Yeah.
That's very generous of you to let them stay in your house. That's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's fun to have cats around, working from home, it's nice to have those distractions of like somebody wanders in and starts meowing and it's not Jill,
Unless you're recording the podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you been working on the house or you've been busy moving?
So a little bit of work getting the basement in order. So like you can see, I've got some unfinished drywall behind me. Didn't get quite everything done. But the most exciting thing that happened was on Thursday, we ran the dishwasher, and when it was done, it was still full of water.
I've had that happen.
So got the trusty. I now have a shop vac that's just dedicated for water. So sucked all the water out. Ran it again. Thought maybe it was fluke. Still water in the bottom. So I ended up tearing apart the bottom of the dishwasher, isolated the pump, piece of broken glass stuck in the pump, put the pump back together. It started running again. I had broken some other molding pieces in the process of fixing the dishwasher. So there was a little bit of water leaking out. So I just shut it off, ordered the parts I think I needed, and they'll be here on Thursday. So we're also hand washing all of our dishes right now.
And
so
is it that much harder?
Yes.
It is, and it uses a ton more water, I think is the yeah.
The research would support that, Kiley, on your website.
I buy it. I don't think in my case, but that's only because I don't have, the pressure.
It's tough to waste water when it's coming out as a trickle.
That's right.
Where did you buy the parts and learn how to do this?
So I had a hunch it was the pump just from some cursory Googling. And so you just throw your model number in and pump. It's a GE dishwasher. Bought it 3 years ago. There's a bunch of great YouTube videos out there that are it was what the hardest part is uninstalling the dishwasher and flipping it over without scratching up your floor.
Right.
Is the hardest part. And then I lost the little bracket that's just a piece of wire that holds the pump in place. And to buy it new, it basically it looks like a paper clip. To buy it new, it was $65 or something. And then
I'm in the wrong business.
I found one on eBay for $8 plus $3 shipping. So
You're so
what was that
savvy.
one?
Good for you, man.
And then there were a couple other hose clamps and gaskets that it was it's appliancepartspro.com. Made ordered enough of those sort of expendable small parts to get the free shipping, and hopefully they arrive soon and I can fix my dishwasher.
Maybe I'll even have to use them.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And I think there's few things as satisfying as fixing a broken appliance, because oftentimes it doesn't cost a lot, right? And it's, easier than a new one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
How about you,
it's
Kylie? I
impressive.
bet you're in the throes of landscaping.
I am. I stained my deck this weekend, and I actually finally committed to two things. I went and got the supplies for the wet and forget to take care of the algae on my siding and shed roof, and among other things. I have furniture I can spray. I'm looking forward to using this stuff now that I have it. I got the sprayer, and I'm ready to go. Although having put so much gravel down in my drive, it's even more dangerous to be on the ladder. So I'm waiting for the rain to stop for a couple of days in a row and for somebody to be around in my neighborhood to hold the ladder for me. So, but I'm glad to have it. Everybody swears by it. You started the whole thing. It's 3 years in the making that I've been talking about it. So
I think actually Mike Gerton, or one of our listeners, was the first person who inquired about this stuff, and I learned about it from them. And I need to do it again. How much of that stuff did you get?
I actually get just a small amount because all I have is the one north-facing side. That's not, and I got concentrate and a pump, and a hand pump sprayer. So.
Did you go backpack sprayer or
No.
hand carry? Yeah.
Yeah, there's not enough. I couldn't justify that. It's too much. I don't need that
But
much.
it's so much cooler.
fluid.
You look like Ghostbusters.
I also decided I'm going to take my neighbor up. 3 years running, he's been offering me an air conditioner window unit. This is the year I say yes. Because the humidity's just starting and I'm already hating it. So I'm going to do it. I started looking at efficient models, but the thing of it is, if your house is as leaky as mine and you're prone to opening windows when you probably shouldn't, then there's no sense. I'm just going to take what's next door available to me.
I think that's wise. And honestly, you're probably only going to use it at night, or will you use it all the... Yeah.
No, just at night.
Yeah, so I think that matters pretty little.
Yep.
How about you, Jeff? You got the AC on?
I turned it on one night last week, mostly just to make sure that it was working.
Saturday night or Friday night, Carol and I decided it was just entirely too hot and uncomfortable, and I went to Home Depot and bought a pair of air conditioners on Saturday.
It's very muggy in New England.
So I think our family's cooling system is about as inexpensive as you could possibly get. About 10 years ago, we bought two 5,500 window air conditioners to the tune of like $450. So they lasted for 10 years. The two new ones I bought, I was expecting them to be way more expensive given how things are right now, but they were about the same price. So
What about your bills? That's one thing I've never experienced because I haven't used air conditioning before. Are your electric bills in the summer noticeably higher than, say, heating?
It's a good question, Kylie. So now that we're heating the barn with resistance heat much of the year, it balances out. It's about the same depending on whether we're heating or cooling. Prior than that, I would say it added about $50 a month to the electric bill.
Yeah.
That's similar to what we do. We have 3 window units in our 1,500 square foot house, and we'll like maybe run them for a month total. And it adds about $50 a month to the electric bill.
What I like about having more than one is like it's staged cooling, right? If you just need a little dehumidification, you can run one of them. We can run both. If it's really hot out, it's kind of fun.
Oftentimes, it's just the one in our bedroom at night that we run, and like we deal with the heat during the rest of the day.
What I find interesting is if you bring the humidity down a few percentage points, oftentimes it is way more comfortable, even with the same ambient temperature. It's really effective.
It's the moisture. Do you think in a 900-ish square foot house, more like 850 actually, that one unit should do it? I should feel cool throughout my open space, right?
I think if you run it long enough, it might take hours, but
Plan for that.
yeah, plan for it, right?
Would you put it upstairs or downstairs?
Upstairs.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Because the cool won't go upstairs. I could tell you.
Right.
The cool doesn't rise.
Right, right, of course.
So I said to myself in the barn, it's pretty well air sealed and insulated. I was like, it won't be stratified, but of course it is. It's hotter upstairs.
Yeah.
How about you, Jeff? You were talking ahead of the show that you've been into auto repair lately, involuntarily, shall we say?
Yeah. I got a couple of projects going on in a couple of the cars right now. So
We're dealing with something I never have, which is anti-lock braking systems, which I find very interesting.
yeah. I had the ABS light came on and I ran the code and it's like, okay, it's a bad sensor in the front left wheel. So ordered the part, had a heck of a time getting the old one out, and then installed the new one, and it didn't seat apparently. So the light went out, but the ABS didn't work right.
So it's pulsing the pedal and stuff as you're trying to drive it. I bet that's pretty disconcerting.
A little bit, yeah. It's like, especially since it's a 22-year-old car, it's like, is this
What's going on?
But it was just needed to be seated better.
Did you have to tear apart the car again to like reseat it? Like that's always the hang up for me on car stuff.
Yeah, it's just taking the wheel off, so it's no big deal.
Well, I have to share my not unfortunate experience with replacing my water heater, but it didn't go as smooth as it could have, let's just say. So years ago, our plumber friend, Mike Lombardi, who's done content for Fine Homebuilding a number of times, he told me that female adapters that screw onto the inlet and outlet of the water tank don't have enough threads to make them seal reliably. And I have used those to connect to a water tank more than once and had not had any trouble. But this was surging through my head as I was shopping for fittings at the home center, and I was like, I should just buy a couple 3/4-inch brass couplings and nipples to connect male adapters to connect this to my copper supply and hot water line. And so I looked at the price, and they were very expensive compared to what I remember. Instead of like $3, I want to say they were $9 or $12, and I'm like, that's too much money. I don't need those. So I bring home my stuff, I connect up my water heater, I'm very pleased with myself, it looks like a nice tidy installation, and I turn it on, the water, and it starts very slowly dripping out of those connections to the tank. And the short version of this long story is that I should have listened to Mike Lombardi. You really do need to use those couplings because you can thread them on further onto those connections and prevent leaks. So if any of you are faced with changing your water heater, don't be cheap. Spend the money, and it'll save you a couple hours. I can tell you that's the outcome. You look stunned, Kiley.
I have to cough, and I'm looking for mute. I don't see it on this Squadcast. Anyway, moving on.
The water heater thing, I think, brings up a very important point. Is like I'm the same way, Patrick. I'm like, I don't, I'm
immune to this information.
$20. Yeah, I've done this before, but it's like I always forget. Like because I'm doing this myself, it costs way. Like I could do it wrong 3 times and still come out ahead.
That's a good point.
So like spending a little bit of money up front is fine. I always like overbuy plumbing parts because it's just like the time going back and forth that like becomes a big suck. But. So my question is, Patrick, was it a one trip to the store install?
It was, Andrew, and if I had like a little celebratory chime, I would play it right now. But yes, ordinarily my plumbing projects take 2-3 trips to the hardware store, but this one was not too bad. Yeah. Anyway, once again, we heard from our fantastic listeners. I asked for feedback on folks with ground source heat pumps, I think in episode 359 maybe? And I heard from Jeff, hey podcast, I like mine, works well, cool in the summer, warm in winter. I was pretty much on my own with the install as no one around here in North Atlanta seemed prepared to even talk about them, let alone get involved in installation. In 2016, I had a 35-year-old system of forced air. It was two two-ton air conditioning units and 2 natural gas-fired furnaces. The AC was not up to the task, but the furnaces poured out heat when fed gas. We were ready to ditch both. I like the drama that's building here. About the only part of your frequent advice that sank in was how much fun it could be to rent a backhoe and dig some stuff up.
That's all he's gathered from you.
Realizing that the ground loop was the biggest fright for most folks, I did some reading on design and methods. Most costs seem to be labor, and with the freedom to roll the dice, I ordered 5,000 feet of 1-inch geothermal tubing at 40 cents a foot, $1,000 worth of fittings and shipping, and a backhoe for a week for $1,000. 6 weeks later, I had 5 ground loops buried in the side yard, pressure tested and terminated in the crawl space. With that part successfully completed, what remained was a more normal install of a purchased heat pump and attached to the air duct. All problems that would have been expected and foreseeable to an expert, in fact, ensued. Subsequently, I added a third heat pump to the same loop system to provide a preheat water for domestic hot water and limited floor heat. In rough figures, the replacement of the existing system was $9,000. The ground source heat pump system was $17,000 less a $5,000 rebate, net more or less $12K, plus one of the best prolonged workouts of my life. There was more spent later on the water-to-water heat pump and underfloor system. No, I'm not an engineer, just an overeducated, now old farm kid. Not sure I want to be recommending this to others, as maybe you could get in over your head pretty quickly. On the other hand, you have a bunch of correspondents whose heads seem way further in the air than mine. Don't know that there's anything here you can use, but after years of shaking my head at some of the podcast advice and nodding my head appreciatively at some of the sagacity of other gems, I felt personally invited to respond to this one. Thanks for all you do, Jeff. That was fantastic.
Yeah,
Thank you, Jeff.
That was a nice note.
I had to look up sagacity. Ironic, right? We also heard from our friend Andy Steele of FRS Builders in North Carolina. The listener that wrote in about his moldy attic stairs in episode 459, after doing some air sealing, brought up an interesting point and something I don't think we think enough about when doing these energy retrofit remodels. I've created a similar problem in my 70s ranch. In my situation, we have a massive chimney in the center of our home. It's roughly 12 feet long and 4 foot wide, servicing one fireplace in the basement, one in the living room, one in the dining room, a wood stove in the unfinished part of the basement, and a gas furnace. The fireplaces each have two 18 by 16 clay flue pipes, while the wood stove and furnace each have a single 8 by 8. We didn't have a chimney cap, so when it rained, we had to put buckets in the fireplace to catch the water that would come in. We didn't use the fireplaces, so I sealed the flow openings at the top of the chimney with XPS foam and can spray foam. Frost then formed up some of the concrete blocks that would cap the chimney. What is that? And can spray foam up some concrete blocks that cap the chimney. Once the concrete was cured, I removed the forms, put in a kerf on the underside to create a drip edge, and installed the caps over the chimney with mortar. I didn't cover the furnace or wood stove flue. This solved the water intrusion issue and stopped a ton of air leakage, but created a new condensation issue. We have a cold storage room under our front porch that is accessed through a door in the finished part of the basement. The cold storage room is concrete block on all sides with a suspended slab ceiling. The joint between the CMUs and the metal that the slab rests on is now the leaky spot and gets so much condensation that it almost rains in there now. This wasn't an issue before sealing a chimney. All this is to say that when we start sealing up older homes, we need to be aware that it will likely cause issues somewhere else that we don't know about. I don't feel like most of the government-run energy audit programs educate their customers about this. I speculate that the issue is more of a lack of education on the auditor's part. As contractors, when we work on older homes, I always do my research to determine how the work I may be doing will affect the home as a system. Just my 2 cents. Keep up the good work on the podcast. I look forward to it every Friday. Andy Steele. Once again, another great letter. Do you guys remember this conversation?
I do. I
Yeah.
was on that one, but the topic had me thinking. Ironically, I was starting to give some thought to a program that I had heard about recently to have some of these home weatherization services done for me. But yeah, this is really good food for thought. What might I invite, given my very wet circumstances,
Right. Andrew, you were on the show, I'm guessing. Do you remember this question?
I think that was Ian.
Yeah, I think it probably was too. So what happened is this folks did some air sealing work, and then the weatherization crew put one of these kind of Reflectix bubble wrap insulation things over the attic access ladder, and they realized that they were starting to get a lot of condensation because now all that warm air was coming up, and hitting
Yeah.
that cold surface, and it's not enough insulation to get the surfaces above the dew point. So
It's like, so because you're not like actively designing a new house, and like the house has just sort of been like the standing for so long because of just like happenstance. So it's like, going in and changing things. Like, I don't even know how you would evaluate how modifying the system of an existing home changes things,
The average person wouldn't be able to. They
Right.
would need to rely on their auditor to provide information about consequences.
and you would hope that those folks have training to know that this is a
Right.
potential issue, but I'm sure they get caught with things they could never have anticipated based on occupant behavior, for starters, right? Because
Right.
people do weird things and you can't predict it.
Yeah, that was one of the things that popped into my head is like, because most of those attic stairs are in the hallway outside the bathroom.
Right. That's so
Right.
true.
Yeah. Yep.
Duh.
If anyone else out there listening to the show has experienced things that you didn't expect to happen when doing weatherization or air sealing work, I'd love to hear about that. Maybe save somebody the hassle or headache of a weird thing that happens.
Do you think it's if like you could have more control over? Is it? So I feel like water and like vapor is the most destructive force in a home. So like, should we just all be installing HRVs and ERVs? And
Not until you tighten your house.
so you need to have a tight house in order for those to perform.
Yeah.
Real
Yeah.
chicken or the egg here.
It really is.
But the thing is, the reason houses, you said happenstance, but really it's just that because they're so leaky, they dry.
Yeah.
And when you start patching up all of those leaks, but not others, and I'm always looking for ways to cover retrofits of existing houses, and it's just such a tricky thing because so many variables
Everyone's
are different.
unique. Yeah.
Every house is unique. But that's not to say you can't get some great lessons, from mistakes or findings.
I have been thinking about this particular situation a lot lately, and I figured if you could somehow glue rigid insulation to the top side of this bubble insulation cover, you could bring it above the dew point and not creating a condensing surface. And then I think your problem would be solved. But of course, it's likely that
It'll introduce another
goes
problem.
somewhere else, right? Do you guys remember Mark's crawl space? He inquired. He has a Connecticut house, and he wanted to know if he should cover the dirt crawl space. And we didn't have any photos at the time, but he sent us a couple photos after he heard us talking about his crawl space later. And for those of you who watch the show, it's a little different than I imagined. These are freaking boulders.
That's what I pictured for whatever reason. When I saw those photos, I knew exactly who had sent them. Yeah.
I was imagining outcrops, boulders that were intruding into the soil level, not like giant boulders as roommates in the crawl space. It's kind of interesting.
One word of advice, he in his feedback, he says, I will get the portable cement mixer if you promise to carry 80-pound bags up the 22 stairs from the street level into the basement and do the pour. As someone who carried 2 pallets worth of bagged concrete into their basement last summer, concrete also comes in 60-pound bags. And there's you're talking like 10 cents a bag upcharge. It's well worth it if you're going to be carrying concrete anywhere.
Yeah. Good tip.
And I also was in the best shape of my life. That week.
There is no Stairmaster that'll give you this kind of workout, I guarantee.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark, I think my advice still stands. I would just try and seal the plastic to the underside of those big boulders as best you can with acoustic sealant, tape, or even if you just cover the majority of it, you're helping to stop that vapor movement. Oh boy, so we've already had a lot of interesting discussion here. This comes from Paul. Hi there, I'm a capable DIYer currently planning to replace a rotted deck on my house. The project will, of course, require me to submit a plan to the county here in Central California to get approval for a permit. While the county hasn't specified how elaborate my plans need to be, I'm assuming they want to see how deep I plan to make my footings, size and spacing of beams, sorts of Simpson connectors I plan to use, and generally how I intend to keep the entire structure from collapsing into an ugly heap of broken boards and big lawsuits. In other words, something better than a crayon sketch, but not as good as an architectural blueprint. I spent a few hours with my father's old 3-sided drafter's rule, drawing out my vision on binder paper the other evening, but I couldn't escape the feeling that I'm doing this the hard way. After all, we have software for this now, don't we? Of course we do, yet sadly, it seems that the minimum price for anything useful is 4 figures plus, as if some retired stockbroker drawing up his 4th vacation home on the Riviera to impress his cocktail party listeners with his Renaissance man skills. Is there really no home drafting software that mortals can afford? This isn't my first project, nor will it be my last. I don't need AutoCAD, but I do need something to help me remember where I plan to put the electrical outlets, where I need to put the studs, and where the HVAC vents are going to go. I need drawings not just for the permit, but to visualize my space, help me estimate cost, guide subcontractors, and identify potential problems before they cost me real money. Good drawings are vital in construction, but are so expensive to make. Help me, Patrick and friends, help me. Love the show and thank you, Paul. What a great question.
SketchUp.
SketchUp.
That's
Yeah.
what, I mean, he almost literally described exactly what it does. And it is, I looked up the plans, the pricing. It's for the basic package, it's called Go, and it's $120 a year. And for the most popular and probably more used among somebody who's got the skills that he has is the Pro version, which is $300 a year. And every builder and some architects that I've ever talked to, they all use it for just that reason, right? Justin used to use it, Brian used it, Matt used it. Do you use it, Patrick? You said you haven't used it as much, but
I wanted to
Rodney's a
ask
huge
you
fan.
two if you've used it and learned how to use it.
But when people get it down a little bit, you don't have to be super savvy to be able to do just the things that he's talking about.
That would,
And, I mean,
I would
if
qualify as not super savvy, Kai.
It's so I used it a lot in former roles in the woodworking world, and it's, you know, you can set your scale, and it's because most buildings are just a combination of rectangles, you know. There's a learning curve. You're going to spend like a week figuring out how to do things that seem like they should be simple, but once you get into the SketchUp mind of thinking, it's pretty cool.
It is
like
cool.
I'm betting the SketchUp library has all of the Simpson strong ties in it that you can just download and insert wherever you need to put them. You know, they've got a bunch of different like humans of different sizes and scales to put into your work too, and it's fun.
It looks like fun.
Yeah.
See people
Guys are
cruising
crazy.
around.
There is nothing fun about it. It's horrible. Anyway.
There's
Really?
a pretty great
the
SketchUp
only
class
person-
that's going to be taught by the Fine Woodworking team here coming up too.
Oh,
Better
cool.
sign up for that, huh? What do you think about this, Jeff?
Yeah, well, I'm actually working on that particular project, but so I'm learning SketchUp.
Cool.
But another thing to look at is, I think it's called Home Planner from Chief Architect. It's their consumer,
Home designer.
Home
And
designer, yeah.
That was on top of my list. You want to tell folks about that, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, it is a scaled down version of Chief Architect, and it is specifically designed for buildings rather than anything.
Yeah, and there are like window drop-ins and door drop-ins and receptacle drop-ins and all the drop-ins he was talking about.
Staircases and.
What about cost?
I think
$100?
it's $100.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So it's on par.
Yeah, and that's a one time. You own it.
Ah, okay.
One thing I think is pretty cool about this is so Chief Architect is widely used in the industry, right?
But
The
excuse
home
me, Patrick,
designer, the home designer
builders-
files can be used by your designer in their full featured version if you get to that point. I'm sorry, Kylie.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but I just was thinking that it strikes me when I go, it seems that architects really like Chief Architect and builders tend to prefer SketchUp. I can't say why, but that's a trend I've noticed.
SketchUp used to be free.
And that's
Is that
I
right?
bet have everything to do with it.
Yeah,
And,
Yeah.
that could be.
and once you get used to something, you don't want to switch, at least speaking for myself, which is why I found
Sure.
SketchUp so agonizing.
Do you use Chief Architect?
No.
Or have you? Okay.
I use my rolling ruler
I
a
love it.
lot.
Yeah.
This is from Stadler, and it's a pretty cool little gadget. I don't know if you have all used it. It's a ruler with a long roller, like a rolling pin attached to it, and it allows it to track straight, so you can draw parallel lines really easily. And it's got holes in it, so you can put a pencil and do perpendicular lines too. Pretty cool.
Well, for your basement project, when you put in the stairs, do you think that having a tool that would have allowed you to visualize it in 3D would have been helpful?
I mean, I think in 3D, so I don't know. Like if someone was less comfortable with how they see things in their mind's eye, I'd say sure, absolutely. Especially for clients who you can like take them into a space and look around with this technology. Now they can not surprise you later and say, you know what, we need to move that window because I didn't think that would look like that there. But so winders and stair design is 2D. It's plan view, at least in my way of thinking. So I was able to draw out what I needed to do on paper or graph paper, saves some time.
The showing somebody what it's going to look like is a vital part of any of my home improvement projects.
Yep.
And like helping somebody visualize something, it's like I also think in 3D, and so it's like, yeah, like that's what the stairs look like in my head. But being able to show somebody what it's going to look like, and even like put colors in, all that kind of stuff, is super helpful and worth the time spent learning some software, in my mind.
Well, especially if you're a DIYer and you're trying to convey your vision and your ideas, your plans to subcontractors, right?
Absolutely.
That's a good communications
You
tool.
need construction documents, for so many reasons. It's there's a reason they call it the plan. I don't know, Paul. That was probably not at all helpful. I would
Well, he's
definitely
got
check.
two recommendations for software programs to look into. How can that not be helpful? That's what he
Well,
asked
because
about.
he has to learn them.
Oh,
Let us know what you do, Paul. And if you stick with your T-square and drafting table, I think there's a
power
lot
to
to
you.
like about that too.
I mean,
find-
a third option, it would be to draft it with it, on your drafting table and send it to somebody to digitize.
that's true.
That's probably more affordable than you think it is.
Yeah.
If you give them a start, especially, Yeah, it's a good conversation. I would love to hear what our listeners think about a reasonably priced design software that does what you need it to. That's great conversation. This comes from Mark. Hello, all. I'm going to install 1x12 shiplap siding on a tiny house in Hunter, New York. It's a 200 square foot box with a 12-12 gable roof and no overhangs. I'd like to install the siding vertically and plan to use corrugated signboard strips, the same idea as Core Event SV3. I would install them horizontally to act as strips for a rain screen. The walls are insulated with 2-pound spray foam and sheathed with zip sheathing and tape, but it has sat out the winter exposed, and we feel it would be best to cover it with a new weather-resistive barrier like Tyvek or similar. A couple of questions. I'd like suggestions on the building wrap type over top the zip sheathing. Perhaps a simple layer of 15-pound felt paper because of its high permeability so it wouldn't conflict with the zip sheathing. What sort of fasteners should we use as they end up being exposed? We're thinking of using 2.5-inch exterior Torx deck screws. Nailing, of course, would be faster, but what nail should I use if I go that route? The pine boards are 11.5 inches wide. I'm concerned about expansion and contraction and cupping across the width of the board. So do we fasten it just once to allow it to move, or 2 to 3 times to restrain it from cupping? I prefer installing it horizontally to shed water better, but may prefer vertical. I would appreciate any advice on the above or anything else regarding the installation and fastening suggestions. Thanks in advance. Mark. Well, so Mark's got this little house. Like you said, it's a box. It's got zip sheathing on it, and he's going to put this very lovely pine siding on it. I'm going to start off by saying I think shiplap works better vertically. because it doesn't trap, it's less likely to trap water because you end up with this cavity channel that water can drain through if it gets between the joints. I'll let someone weigh in now.
How long are you allowed to leave zip sheathing exposed and taped? I don't know off the top of my head, but like there is a time limit, and it was longer than I thought it would be. But it sent me down the. Is there a way to like test if your installation is still good?
I think it would look degraded. I mean, if the coating looks like it's in good shape, I wouldn't worry about it. And if you are, put the felt paper on there as insurance. It's not going to hurt anything.
Yeah.
And I think it also helps decouple, boards that are going to expand and contract seasonally, especially big ones. These are wide. I would worry more about these than if they were half the width. And you could get into Hoadley's guide printed by Fine Woodworking decades ago, right, and figure out how much these boards are expected to move. And you can get really down a rabbit's hole if you want to with that. But I would nail it up, get on with my life. And if you want screws, it's not going to take that much longer. It's not that big a building. And the great thing about that is you can replace them if they rot at the bottom easily.
Would we need to use stainless screws for this?
I think at a minimum, the yellow zinc. I've had great success with the yellow zinc structural screws, siding screws, trim screws. What's up, Kylie?
Oh, I was just thinking, we've done a couple of articles recently on WRBs and mechanically fastened versus, self-adhered. Actually, that one just published today. I was just wondering if there's any argument for him using a self-adhered membrane, but it doesn't, seems like overkill, expensive overkill, right?
And he's got spray foam interior, so that's the vapor control layer, right? From the interior.
Right. So but I was thinking what he was looking for was a vapor permeable membrane, membrane, a house wrap.
So if any water gets behind it, it can dry, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what he's after. Am I right to think that?
I think so. And the zip sheathing is going to prevent inward vapor drive because it's the WRB there.
Oh, I thought he was saying that he was questioning its ability to serve as a WRB at this point.
I think he is because of how long it's been exposed.
Right. Anyway,
what do you think? Do you think you should worry about it?
I don't know that I have a strong opinion about it one way or the other. It seems like I think I'd be worried about it if I saw a product that had been sitting out for a long time but I like Andrew's idea of somehow maybe figuring out a way to test it. But maybe that's more work than we realize.
I think, setting up the spray rack and doing a spray test would be great fun, but I'd worry about with that closed cell spray foam on the interior. Like if you have leaks that blast through the sheathing seams or wherever, like there's no way that's ever going to dry.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like a good idea. What would you do, Patrick? I mean, would you add house wrap?
I think I would trust my judgment on how it looked. Like if it looked like it was peeling off and failing, absolutely. If it looked like it was solid and beating water, I wouldn't worry too much about it. I don't think a layer of felt paper would hurt at all. So if you're worried about it, why not?
True.
And I totally would pay attention to, I'll put a link on our podcast page that shows an article on how to fasten board siding, because there are right ways to do it that allow movement, and there are ways that prevent movement, and the boards will split when they shrink, because you need to account for that movement, especially when the boards are wider. And you can do that with battens, or you can do it with the nailing, but you have to think about it. Sound legit, Kylie?
Yeah.
I feel like wood movement should be taught in schools more than it is now.
In public schools in general, or trade schools?
Everywhere, I feel like I've got, I build furniture, so like I understand how wood moves, and I have friends who see furniture I've built, and then they want to build their own, and then they do, and then like stuff ends up cracking or breaking, because they're like more screws is better and more glue is better, and you don't want anything to move, but it's like if you think about it, you understand that wood moves, but like you don't think about it until you've limited that wood movement.
And I would point out, you live in the wood movement capital of the country.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just crawling along everywhere. It's crazy.
You guys are nuts.
This comes from Jim. My 30-year-old house is sided with half-inch thick beveled red cedar clapboards. Over the years, I've had to re-nail some cut boards. My local lumberyard has recommended 5D, 1 3/4 inch smooth shank galvanized nails. I have more to re-nail on the west side, which gets a lot of sun and weather. I have read that ring shank or spiral nails would be a better choice. A lot of the butt joints are not aligned on studs, so long nails may not be of much benefit. Is there a big difference between ring shank and spiral shank nails? 2-inch nails? Does that sound okay? That sounds okay.
You know
6D?
nails, Patrick, yeah?
So you absolutely want ring shank or spiral shank nails. I would say stainless would be a good choice because they will be less likely to streak on your cedar siding. It depends on if your siding is natural or if it's coated, what happens with the fasteners. But I would, you're not talking about too many. Buy some ring shank spiral nails and you'll get frustrated every time you hit a knot in a stud because they'll bend right over and you won't even know why. Yeah. The lumberyard giving you bad advice. 5D smooth shank galvanized, it's like the worst choice. It's right? Blue drywall nails would only be marginally worse,
I have a little something to share. I bumped into Brian Pontilillo yesterday at the market. And do you guys know what a wind hook is?
No.
Okay,
No
so he told me the day before they actually started erecting walls. And the first one, they jacked it up. He had a team of family members helping and a builder. They got the wall up and it got caught in a breeze and it came right back down, and the wall framing. And he said, the worst part was that I have the perfect accessory to handle that situation. It's called a wind hook, and I completely forgot to use it. So I just thought, and we wound up having a conversation around, he said, that's the difference between knowledge and experience.
Yeah.
It's like everything went up according to plan, but then this little wind event happened and everything got, so I said, keep track of those things. Get a story out of it. Lessons learned kind of stuff. Little precautions to take.
What is a wind hook then? Like, what does it look like?
I'm not sure what it looks like. The way he put his fingers, I assume it gets put, I actually don't know. I would have to look it up. I don't know how it works. I could visualize it judging from how he was talking, but not enough to re-articulate it for you.
I don't know what that is, so we'll have. Hopefully, he'll write in with some thoughts on what he did there and future wall erection.
I'll look into it and get an update or give some, the better description of it.
I don't mean to gloat here, but that's never happened to me because you just absolutely, the stakes are stupidly high with volunteers and falling walls, right? Because they don't even know when something's going to go wrong. So you really just got to be crazy bracing stuff all the time. Mm-hmm. I bet that only happens once to most builders before you take it way more seriously the second time, right? Especially if it's on the second floor. Then you got to go down to the ground and get the wall and tear it all apart and put it back together.
Yeah, he didn't lose much material. A couple of pieces of sheathing.
Yeah. Of course, that's probably like $600 now.
I know.
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing. The way he chalked it up to not being so bad, I was like, oh, well, sounds expensive to me.
Well, as long as no one was hurt, because the sheathing doesn't matter. People getting squished by it is way worse. Did you guys ever have a weird thing happen when you were doing something around the house that you were thankful it didn't hit you?
Oh, I'm sure I have. I can't remember it.
I'm thankful every day nothing is hitting me. So.
I almost fell off a scaffold once.
Oh,
Stepped on my shoelace and did a face plant.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that was woke you up.
Yeah, that's when you like the stakes are high here. I need to pay attention to what I'm doing every second.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hit my head on the ductwork replacing the water heater with such ferocity I swore I was going to be unconscious. I was like,
Yeah. I've seen stars. I've hit my head hard on things.
oh, and ductwork is stupidly sharp. I was like,
Oh,
okay,
yeah, I bet.
am I unconscious or am I bleeding? No. All right, I'm okay. This comes from Mark from Massachusetts.
Oh, I thought we were, sorry. I thought we
what?
were at the end note here.
Do you have somewhere to go, Kylie?
No, the Brian Ponzilillo thing was supposed to be the end note.
This comes from Mark from Massachusetts. Hey, podcast. I'm struggling with what is the best or preferred way to insulate my basement walls. In order of priority, I want air quality first and cost last while meeting code. Apologies for the essay. It's a 1920s house with a poured concrete basement. It's dry with no water or dampness issues. It's a few miles west of Boston in Zone 6. So that's actually Zone 5, Mark, which more on that in a little bit, which I think means continuous R15 insulation or R19 cavity insulation or R13 cavity with 5 continuous. It's an approximately 43 by 34 foot unfinished basement. The rim joists have already been insulated with 2 inches of spray foam using the local Mass Save resources. To save money, I'm planning on doing the insulation and framing myself, and I'll sub out the electrical and drywall. I'll probably use metal studs, but have not ordered them yet. I will be pulling permits. The final finished space will be considered finished storage rather than living space. It is just under the height requirement. So it seems like I have several options to meet code for my basement insulation. All right, option 1, 3 inches of XPS stuck directly to the concrete. 4 inches of EPS stuck to the concrete. Some combination of XPS and EPS stuck to the concrete with a minimum of 2 inches as a vapor control layer and R15 mineral wool in the cavity. R15 seems to be the most common at the local box store. The spray foam will be a little over 2 inches to the wall, R7 per inch. I don't know if I understand that, but you guys know what he's talking about?
He's presenting 4 different strategies for insulating.
Oh, I see. So this is another of the ways.
Yeah, spray
okay,
foam
thanks.
would be one strategy.
Okay, so a little over 2 inches. Gotcha. The ballpark costs of each seem to be in the region of $2,000 to $3,000 using new material. I would consider them fairly comparable in terms of the overall project cost, and it would not sway me one way or another. I am not considering fiberglass bats because of the potential mold issues. All right, questions. Are my assumptions, options correct, and am I missing any? Which one should I do, and are there pros and cons to each? The spray foam option is the easiest as I write a check and it's ready for framing, but I'm concerned about the air quality first and environmental impact second. Are there any greener spray foam options available now? So yes, there are better spray foam options with less damaging, what do you call it?
Blowing agents.
Blowing agents, thank you, Kylie. And you got to talk to your spray foam contractor about that. I know the original one was by BASF or whatever. Anyway, but you can find better spray foam. The XPS is an easy DIY option, and there is a local place to buy used seconds, which reduces the environmental impact. But are there long-term air quality issues to consider about XPS and any concerns about buying used? I would say that's what I would totally do. If you can get used insulation, the carbon cost is already there. It's way less expensive, and it's insulation, so who cares, right? It's never seen.
And
The risk is you're not supposed to put polyiso in a potentially wet environment because it will take on moisture because the cells are open to water. So you need to use XPS or EPS if you think there's going to be any chance it's going to contact water and take it up. I need to look into EPS more as I think this is the most air quality, environmentally friendly option. Are there issues with water waking up with EPS? The need to put 4 inches on the wall is also giving me cause as it pushes out the wall the most. Absolutely. EPS is less damaging to the planet than old versions of XPS, but old versions of XPS are also being phased out in favor of these newer blowing agents also. Solstice, I think, was that one blowing agent. Go ahead. Honeywell was the company that made it. What's up, Kylie?
Oh, just I was thinking, what is it? Owens Corning and DuPont both have come out with more climate-friendly, as they put it, XPS formulations. One of them is called XPS Foamular or something like that. Yeah, it's Foamular.
So
but
that
what
could be
about-
confusing because that was the old version's name too, which is something that huge
don't-
chemical companies always do.
Okay, well, don't take my word. That's what my memory serves. But what about the idea of? Seems like a lot of people go for the option of putting EPS on the walls, building a stud wall to the interior of that, and filling with dense packed cellulose, capped with drywall.
Well, interestingly, his one of his last questions is the EPS or XPS mineral wool option, which you just described, is at the bottom of my list just because it is slightly more work, but it pushes out the wall the least. Should I give it more thought? Yes, because it's also going to be less cost than all this foam, no matter what kind of foam you're choosing.
That's not what. I wasn't talking about mineral wool. I was talking about
Dense pack, yes.
dense packed
Yeah.
cellulose. Yeah.
So I think it would be close equivalent, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
You like cellulose, I'm guessing, because it's a greener option than...
Well, and because he's concerned about air quality. So that would be, you'd have your EPS to the very furthest most from your interior space, right? So no off-gassing there, especially if he's using recycled product. And then he's got cellulose in the cavity. So that seems like a very healthy, as far as a basement environment goes.
Any thoughts,
for
anyone on that?
products.
So the EPS and mineral wool is exactly what I've done in my basement where I'm sitting right now.
Uh-huh.
And I was able to find there's something like 40 sheets, 4x8 sheets of EPS that were pulled out of a pole barn that was being demolished. And it was during the height of the pandemic, so I got them for $3 a sheet. And it was like
Good for
a
you.
that's
screaming deal.
Sweet,
Why, I
yeah.
didn't realize you were,
And
you're,
He's the cheapest
He's-
as the rest of us, Kylie.
I'm trying to find the right word. Cheap was not it.
and so and I was mostly concerned. First of all, I couldn't find anywhere that had EPS in the quantity I wanted to buy. It was either like I could get a couple of sheets or I could get like 1,000 sheets, and I needed like 30.
Heard
But
that before.
the other part is like, because I'm doing a lot of this work myself, I'm doing it in stages. And so like I could do one room and like put the EPS on the wall and then fill my SUV full of mineral wool and install that. And like it's one room is done and I can move everything from one part of the basement to the other to finish the other rooms. But having worked a lot with other insulations and then working extensively with mineral wool, it's almost like a joy to install. It's like very easy to detail and get it like sized just right. And especially in an old house where like your stud spacing isn't, super accurate, cutting it to fit is, I'm not going to say fun, but it's more fun than other bad insulations I've had to deal with.
It's probably a whole lot less expensive than having dense pack blown in too, right?
Well, and you can do it, piecemeal. You don't have to
Incrementally, yeah.
wait to
Right.
do the
You're
whole
not,
thing at once.
yeah, you're not relying on an installation team, right?
Yeah.
I agree with you, Mark, that, calling the spray foam contractor would be, a half day's work for them. And then, you let it vent out for a few days or whatever, and you're up and running.
I don't
you
know.
don't like that idea.
People who are sensitive to spray foam can smell it a year later. So,
Do you think those folks have bad installs, Kylie, or is it just...
Well, who knows? I don't know. Michael Maines has said to me that even on a good install, his nose will tell him when there's spray foam in the house, even a year
Interesting.
later. So it depends on,
Their
it's just
sensitivity?
something, your sensitivity.
I don't
But
like
also
the
it's just-
idea of cellulose in the basement. I got to say,
No?
it gives
Okay.
me the willies because, it is never going to dry out if something happens. Whereas mineral wool water pours right through it, and foam
True.
insulation doesn't care.
Right.
And if you're using steel studs, they don't care.
Yeah. Martin just recently did a 3 ways to insulate a basement wall article that's fairly comprehensive and has great construction detail drawings. So I would recommend looking at that too. And the wall assembly that you're both in favor of is one of them, one of the ways.
I feel so validated.
I know.
Yeah.
I bet you do. My idea was not listed. Filling with mineral wool bats.
Well, Mark, I have to thank you for, maintaining our, typical conversation topics because, we got a little farther afield this time. So it's good to get back to comfort, talking about basement walls and mold and insulation, air sealing, what have you. I was going to say that here's something related to Mark's question, and he indicated he was in Zone 6, but he's in Zone 5. Interestingly, the basement requirements are the same for both climate zones in the basement. I didn't pay attention to the rest of the building, but I thought that might help you and mean less insulation. I figured listeners might be interested to know. I looked up the respective code provisions in the energy efficiency section of the IRC, and it's basements are often largely above ground, right? If more than half of your measured wall area is below grade, it's considered a basement, which have lower R value requirements than above grade walls for probably obvious reasons, because you have soil that's also acting as an insulation. And as we've talked about earlier in the show, heat wants to rise and all these things. So measure up your basement and figure out if you need to do it to the wall requirements or the foundation / basement insulation levels, because I think they're probably different. Jeff, have you thought about insulating your basement?
All the time.
I know,
Every
right?
podcast.
Me too.
And thinking about it is so much cheaper.
Oh my gosh, and so much less work, and there's so much less moving all the garbage in the basement, yes. I feel especially guilty because I have a large section of above grade block foundation, and that is a huge heat sink. I bet it contributes 20 or 30% to my house's heat load. And it wouldn't be that hard or that expensive to fix, but honestly, it's just such a hassle because you have mechanicals in the way. I got an electrical panel in the way. I got water lines coming in. I got sewer lines going out. There's a water tank in the way.
So what would you do? How would you
Call
do
the
it?
spray foam company.
Yeah. That's one of those scenarios where it's like that's probably is the best bet.
It's
But
a
you have
lot
to-
of very fiddly work. Yeah, it's
Cutting and cobbling,
Yeah.
that kind of scenario.
How many hours do you think you have in your base? Let's just call it the insulating part of your project, Andrew.
100 probably.
Yeah. That's a lot of weekend hours, evening hours.
It's almost exactly 100 linear feet of wall, and there's 8 windows and water lines, and yeah, it's
Did you consider spray foam?
no, and it's because I'm cheap. And also, you run into a situation where I'm not sure that my project meets the minimum price for folks in my area because they've got bigger buildings to insulate.
They just wouldn't want to bother with you.
Yeah. Well, they
Yeah.
give you the price that I could insulate 3 basements for, but I
Right.
just need the one insulated.
Where did you find your recycled foam? Where's that? What do you recommend for people to find that? Craigslist,
so
I know, is one.
Glad
Yeah,
you asked that too.
I found mine on Craigslist, just looking for EPS. And it was, I'm in Minneapolis, and it was a guy in St. Cloud, which was it was an hour and a half drive. I had to rent a U-Haul to go there, get it all loaded up.
You're hardcore, man. I love it.
And I still, I ended up probably with the U-Haul, I was looking at $5 or $6 a sheet, which is still a screaming deal. And
Gosh, if you buy that stuff at the home center, I'm sure it's a little better if you go to an insulation supplier, but it is crazy expensive.
Like how much for a new sheet?
Like $30, I want to say, for 2-inch XPS. It is insane.
Wow.
and even, pre-pandemic, it was still 12, 15, almost $20. Yeah. So if you can find recycled foam, it's absolutely worth the time, travel, distance. Probably even getting it shipped to you is worthwhile if you need a significant enough quantity.
Folks are probably tired of me hearing me say it, but I bought my Barnes foam from Insulation Depot, and I checked their website today, and they actually have some material in Framingham, Mass, which is really not that far away from Boston. I got my stuff shipped from New Jersey, and it was a third of the price of new stock, and I felt much better about it because of its carbon content is already spent, and I saved it from the landfill and got it 2 huge stacks of insulation. It's the best part. Mark, please keep us posted on what you do, because I don't know if I bet this is one of our top 10 questions. Don't you guys think?
Yep. Yep. In fact, right after I read this script, I went on to GBA, and the very same question was there. Although that reader had a twist in that there was existing foam there. It wasn't foam. It wasn't foam board. What was it? No, it was. It was ISO board. So he was wondering if he should just go right over it with another foam or pull it out or what. Anyway, yes.
Let's save that question for the next podcast, because we'll need another insulating question, especially in basement walls.
It's a popular question,
Well, anything we need to mention before we part company?
Nope, I already did.
What was that? Oh, Brian's
project, The windhook recommendation.
Yeah, let's figure out what a windhook is.
Yeah.
And he's posting on GBA, right? Talking about his build?
Yep, not in any kind of regular way. When he found, I have on Wednesday of this week, we're going to post about the importance of the mud sill, getting it right. There's some good stuff there. Everything.
That brings a tear to my eye. That's that's a really nice thing. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Andrew, Kiley, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Keep the questions coming, please.